Ayo, this is T.O.T. and there was a decade-old argument that was popping up on one of Marissa's videos that I'd seen. Basically, the whole context of the conversation was, what do free-to-play players bring to the table? A big part of the reason why this conversation had surfaced, in my opinion, was because some people that had older phones, for example, found out that their phone was no longer compatible to be able to run Honkai Impact 3rd. Some people were making the discussion, at least on Reddit side, from what I had seen, that, the company looks at you as a free-to-play, you don't really bring any value to the table, so why should they try to hold on to you? I do think this viewpoint is a little bit disingenuous. I don't inherently agree with it. I do want to explain, from my POV anyways, that whether you're free-to-play, small spender, a whale, or Leviathan, you are bringing some type of value to the game, especially if you spend a consistent amount of time per week playing Honkai Impact 3rd. Obviously, if you're a whale or a Leviathan, you are providing most of the financial stability for the company to be able to work on a wide variety of things, whether that's continuing the development of the game, these animated shorts that are just beyond epic and beautiful, merch, tours, things along those lines. So I do appreciate the whales and the Leviathans in that aspect. So this next part, I'm going to address what the value of free-to-plays, what do they bring to the table? For starters, in most games of this kind of nature, the most successful companies in my opinion are the companies that are able to appeal to both the free-to-play market and also at the same time your whales and your Leviathans. They find some type of way to satisfy both crowds. Obviously, if a company sways too much in one direction or in the other, it does tend to cause some issues. When it comes to free-to-play specifically, the free-to-play's job, for one thing, in my opinion, is to maintain population counts and maintain player retention rates. Because your whales and your Leviathans, in most cases, they're not going to make up the mass majority of the population. Another thing to take into consideration for free-to-plays that they bring to the table is that they're new blood. So this will help the game from not falling into a legacy status, which would end up making it very unfriendly for new players. Let me explain what I mean. So let's look at, like, say, Memorial Arena, for example, or Abyss. Except instead of using Memorial Arena or Abyss, we'll use a fighting game in this context, Tekken 7. So say somebody is a new player, they've never played Tekken in their life, they go online to play against other people, but everybody's a literal 5-year veteran. Straight up 5-year veteran. This new player is getting demolished. They're not able to find any players around their skill level or their experience time playing the game, and they're just getting stomped. Some people will persevere through that. A lot of other people are going to quit. That's why it's important for there to be a decent number of free-to-play players, so that way other free-to-play players can compete with people more in their league until they get themselves built up. The initial upfront experience is also extremely important, especially for these free-to-play players. Just because somebody's free-to-play today does not mean they're going to be free-to-play a year from now. Maybe they don't have a job currently, maybe it's a situation where they're in college, or maybe saving up for a house or a vehicle or getting a better job. But for some of these people, it is possible they get converted over into a small spender or into a whale or into a Leviathan in the future. This is pretty important because in a game's lifespan, whales, Leviathans, they will either cut back on their spending or they'll just completely stop spending money on the game at all because of real life responsibilities, or maybe they just got burnt out with Honkai Impact 3rd. They ended up not liking it. They decided we're going to play something else. So with MiHoYo, when they see free-to-play players, that's an opportunity for them to be able to convert some of those players into small spenders or into whales or into Leviathans. Let's be honest here. It's going to be a lot easier for MiHoYo to get $20 out of 10 players versus to get $200 out of a single player. Same amount of money, one's just going to take a lot more effort than the other. When it comes to me personally, I rely on free-to-play players because you all help make the brackets more balanced. So I'll use Memorial Arena as an example. So in the past, to get like top 2%, I would only need to score about 118,000, maybe 300, 400 points. Now in these days, since the post-moon arc has ended, I have noticed that I do need to score a lot higher for that same top 2%. I might need to score 118,600 or 700 for the same top 2%. This is a result of players not playing Memorial Arena or just not playing the game at all anymore. So it does have a negative impact on me. And there's people out there that are semi-competitive or hardcore competitive. They're not able to make that top 2%. It just creates this trickling down effect to where they get to the point and they just say in their head, well, I can't get top 2%. I might as well not even try. So then they start playing the game less and less and less. And it just causes this rippling domino effect. One last thing that I'll mention is I think at times whales do sometimes get disconnected from the common everyday issues that other players would be having, that a whale could just throw money at and it would be resolved. That's why I think it's very important sometimes to have the free-to-play perspective and the small spender perspective as well, because they have some valuable takes as well. Like, hey, this is a little bit too grindy. Can they do something for this? And a whales and leviathans, you could say that, oh, well, they don't do anything for the free-to-play experience, but they do. They give out quite a bit of stuff for the free-to-plays. They are, for the most part, consistently working on trying to improve the free-to-play experience. And by improving the baseline experience of the game, Leviathans and whales can benefit from it as well. Like if MiHoYo puts out a free cosmetic, for example, everybody can benefit from that. Unless, of course, you just don't like the character or don't have them. In regards to Honkai Impact Part 2, there has been a notion that if you do not like what Honkai Impact Third 2 has to offer and you have your concerns or your criticisms about it, then you're basically not a fan of Honkai Impact Third and you can go off and play something else. You won't be missed. The issue that I personally have with this is that at the end of the day, no game is perfect. We don't really know what Honkai Impact 2 is going to bring to the table in full. Only time is really going to tell. I understand where some players are coming from, because if you think about it, the main crew cast have been around for years. They've had a lot of time to have their character development, and change can be a very scary thing. And now that I think about it, there are certain players that know these characters and been around these characters even further back than Honkai Impact Third. For some, it goes all the way back to Gun Girl Z. I personally have never played Gun Girl Z, so my connection doesn't go that far back. I think for me, in regards to Honkai Impact Third Part 2, I'm going to give MiHoYo about 3, maybe 4 patches to kind of get everything grounded and settled. And then after that, I think I'll have a good idea for sure of what direction they're going to take the game in full. Things don't get fully done correctly over one patch. That's never been the case with this game. So I'm just going to be in that wait and see camp. I know a lot of other people aren't going to have that type of patience, and I don't blame them. It's not a right or wrong thing. It's just a very subjective per person case. I'm not worried about the new characters being written poorly. However, at the end of the day, these are different characters. They may not gel with certain people, and that is completely fine within itself. To the people that are in fear of these new characters, the new change in settings, things along those lines, I do want to put this out here as a mention that the characters that we have grown to love over the years, whether it's Kiana, Bronya, Fuwa, Terry, whoever the case is, their character arcs for the most part are finished. And it's not to automatically be under the assumption that we'll never see these characters again, or there's not going to be cameo appearances of these characters. I don't think that will be the case. But if you think about it, some of the best moments from Honkai Impact Part 1 came from when some of these characters got a power up and it was tied to heavy character development. Hersher of Thunder, Hersher of Flameshin are pivotal moments that stand out in my mind personally as a player. To the people that say, oh, you don't like Part 2, therefore you are not a fan, I have to disagree with this. Somebody can still be a fan of something and just not like certain parts of it. I'll use myself as an example. I am not a fan of the Norse God of War games. However, the God of War Greek saga games will always be held dear in my heart. Just because I'm not a fan of the Norse God of War games does not mean that all of a sudden I am no longer a fan of the series. I can still go back and play the Greek saga God of War games and still get a ton of enjoyment out of those particular games. I think it's a similar case for people who are not currently a fan of Part 2. They can still go back and play Part 1 and enjoy Part 1 for what it is. That doesn't inherently mean that they're no longer a fan of the game. They just may not be a fan of the direction that the game is going to be going in regards to Part 2. In my opinion, I don't think it's very beneficial for any of us to start getting into the mentality of one party is more valuable or less valuable than a different party. We're all spending our time on Honkai Impact Third at the end of the day. Again, we're all contributing in our own way, shape, or form. And I do think that most of us want to see Honkai Impact Third in as good of a condition as it possibly can be in. That's my thoughts for this video. If you take another time to listen to this or watch this, just want to say thank you for your time. You be safe out there. Deuces.